Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, folks, or whatever time it is for you. Good morning here. Our plant today, we're going a little different. We have one of the premier Chinese tonic herbs that we're going to talk about today. And so I wanted to have a discussion about the challenges that happen when Western herbalists, or people who have been raised with the Western dominant culture and the Western medical mindset, look for information on Chinese herbs and information on Chinese herbs, which is presented in the language of the dominant culture of China, which is different. The not only the dominant culture, but also the medical model. Right. And so we have language and concepts that are specific to how we think about anatomy and physiology and disease states that are, good morning, Ren. Yeah, it's one we come across this so often that I just really like to explain these because they're really, really cool. These concepts are really helpful. So we're going to jump into an understanding of kind of a beginning understanding of Chinese energetics and Chinese herbalists through the lens of a Western herbalist. Now, let me be very clear. I am not trained as a TCM herbalist. I have a couple of years of training. I did a little bit of work with Chinese herbs, a little bit of work with Ayurvedic herbs, just enough to get me into trouble. But my primary training is as a Western herbalist. And so I'm always going to have the mindset and the lens, the framework of a Western herbalist. So if you really want to learn about a Chinese herb from a Chinese herbalist, which you should, you'd want to go and find a Chinese herbalist for me. Good morning. And that would not be me. But it's also a challenge, and this is why I'm taking this on. It is a challenge to translate that information, because a Chinese herbalist is going to have the same challenges that I'm going to have in that inability sometimes to translate, right, what they're thinking about their medical model and their anatomical and physiological concepts, and translating that into a Western mindset, right? Hi, Sandra. Happy Monday to you too. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at Chinese herbs, looking at a tonic herb that is a really valued tonic herb in Chinese herbalism for one specific action, and we have taken it in Western herbalism and just kind of limited the focus and use of this plant. And so this is a perfect example of the challenges of translation between TCM and Western herbalism. So the plant that we're looking at today, and will be in the next couple of weeks as we look through this, common name, Yin Yang Huo is the, and forgive my pronunciation, again, I am not a Chinese herbalist, translates to licentious goat herb, giving it the other common name of horny goat weed. So horny goat weed is a literal translation there. And the botanical name, the genus is Epimedium. And this is a spa. Spa means that all species within this genus are considered to be medicinal. Doesn't really matter which species you're using, as long as it's in the Epimedium genus, it is considered to be the herb and will be used interchangeably, right? So sometimes that makes a tremendous difference. Sometimes a specific species of a plant will have a completely different action and chemistry and will be not therapeutically active if it is a different species, even if it is in the same genus. And sometimes we can say, nope, anything within this genus, it's fine. It's all going to be basically the same. Right? So that's what it means when we say spa. Hey, Tuko, good morning. So yin yang ho, also known as horny goatweed, also known as Epimedium. So Epimedium is the name that I generally prefer to call it, just because, again, horny goatweed, the term horny goatweed just really minimizes our understanding of the plant. So this is a plant that is a classic Chinese tonic herb. And tonic herbs are herbs that generally have a strengthening and nourishing effect. You know, the word tonic can be a problematic word in herbalism because there's a bunch of different things that it means, including for a large amount of the population who are not herbalists, it's kind of a snake oil term, right? It's like, oh, tonic doesn't really mean anything. We generally use that term for one of two things: something that is generally nourishing and strengthening, building, tonifying, as it were. So something that is what we also sometimes refer to as a tropho-restorative, which I prefer. Even though it's a longer and harder word, I prefer it because it doesn't lend itself to some confusion the way that tonic can. So tonic can be tropho-restorative, but we want to remember that tonic can also mean improving tone, and that's where we're looking at the structural energetic patterns, right? We have three energetic patterns that we look at. We look at the thermal patterns of heating and cooling. We look at the fluid patterns of drying and moistening. And we look at the structural patterns of relaxant and tonifying, or tonic, right? And so something that is tonic would be something that is astringent, right? It's astringent, it's tonifying, tightening tissues up. So when we see that word, we kind of want to stop and go, okay, well, how is that person using that word? Are they using it as a general catch-all, it's good for you term? Are they using it as a tropho-restorative? Are they using it as a tonic astringent? Right? In Chinese herbalism, generally when they talk about the tonic herbs, they're talking about tropho-restoratives, generally nourishing, building plants. Generally, plants that we refer to as endocrine tonics or adaptogens are the tonic herbs. So these are things like the ginsengs and ashwagandha and Codonopsis, eleuthero, the really nourishing, deep, strengthening, building herbs, or we refer to as tonic. So this is a tonic herb in Chinese herbalism, and it is a specific for what is called, so here we're going to go into our TCM, again, TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, TAM, traditional Ayurvedic medicine, TWM, traditional Western medicine. So those are acronyms for the three kind of major modalities of Western herbalism, Western, Chinese, and Ayurvedic. Does tend to minimize all of the many other traditions of healing and herbalism around the world, but those are kind of the big three. All right, so in TCM, Epimedium is what's called a kidney yang tonic. So kidney yang tonic. This is the strength of this plant. Oh, let me pour you some so you can drink some as I'm telling you about this. I'm all excited about going kind of a different way today.
Does this have any bitter?
No, it's not really bitter. It's a very nice tasting plant.
I'm on a slow but bitter.
Or yeah. See, I knew you and Andrew Graffis would break up eventually.
Yeah. I mean, I stopped paying that a while ago, but
No, this is a very nice one. This Also, didn't mention the family. Sorry. So the family here is the, whoopsie. This is the Berberidaceae family. What is that family? Does anyone know? Not Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Well, also that.
Just the look of the name would be like the berberine.
Berberine family, that's exactly right. Yes, so Berberis vulgaris is barberry. So this is the barberry, Oregon grapefruit, golden seal, Chinese gold thread, coptis, all of the berberine containing plants. Berberine is a really big, interesting constituent in herbal medicine right now because of the really powerful effects that berberine has on blood sugar and blood pressure and a number of other things as an isolated constituent. That is why, by the way, it's almost impossible to find barberry these days. Barberry is a weed plant. It's an abundant plant. It's so abundant and it's inexpensive. It's always been just one of the great workhorse plants because it's really, really medicinal, but it was just so cheap and really available. But now that there's this worldwide interest in berberine as a constituent, it is impossible to get barberry right now. So y'all who have Japanese barberry growing as an invasive weed, that's a cash crop. So this is in the Berberidaceae family, but all of those other plants generally have a really strong bitter flavor because berberine and related alkaloids are very, very bitter. And this is not bitter. So this is a Berberidaceae family plant, but it does not have the isoquinoline alkaloids like berberine that are so generally apparent in the family. It's a very nice tea. It's a really neutral flavor, right? It's just it doesn't have a strong bitterness. It has a bit of a starchiness to it. Very neutral, very nourishing tasting, as generally tonic herbs are. So, kidney yang tonic. Let's talk about what we mean by that if we think about it in Western herbs. Because when we talk about organ systems, this is the big thing, the first big thing to remember when we're translating Chinese herbs to Western herbalism. When we're talking about the kidney system in TCM, we are talking about a functional system. We're talking about the kidney system as a way of conceptualizing a very complex ecosystem in the body, and we'll go into that. What we're not talking about is an anatomical system, right? When in the Western medical model, in the Western mindset that most of us have been raised in, when we're talking about kidneys, we're talking about those two little guys right there, perched right on top of our adrenals, right? Or right below our adrenals, that filter blood and regulate waste, right? That is what we think of when we're thinking of the kidney system. And so whenever we are reading about Chinese herbs and we see anything having to do with kidney, immediately our brain goes to, oh, we're talking about those. But we want to remember, if we're talking about Chinese herbalism, we're talking about kidney system as a functional system. And this means much more. It's much more complex and much more rich than that. So what do we mean when we talk about the kidney system? So the kidney system, number one, is characterized what's called Jing. Jing is life essence. This is the life force, the generative force, the reproductive cycle. This is endocrine system life force. It's Jing. It's one of the treasures, one of the precious treasures of Chinese herbalism. And so the kidney system nourishes and builds Jing in the body, nourishes and builds that life essence. They're also associated with growth and reproduction. So here we're looking at things like puberty and fertility and pregnancy, aging, but also structural compounds in the body associated with aging. So sinews, which are like ligaments and tendons and muscle connective tissue, teeth and hair and nails, yeah, and generally aging, right? So that's another area of the kidney system. Reproductive and sexual function are also in this category, and some fluid regulation, because it does also include the anatomical kidneys as well. So it's sort of the kidneys and the adrenals and the endocrine system having to do with the gonads, right? So the ovaries and the testes, it's kind of everything in that area. Now, oftentimes people will, and I don't work with this system, so I'm not going to speak at length about this, but people will often organize the chakra systems with the endocrine systems, right? So we have the crown chakra with the hypothalamus, and then going down. And when we get to the root chakra, we have that pelvic region. We have the adrenals kind of in the back there, a little bit higher, but the adrenals and the gonads, and the kidneys are kind of all in that root chakra area. So that, if you are familiar with and work with the chakra systems, that can also be a concept for you to hold, is what we think of when we're thinking about kidneys. So it's much more than just the anatomical kidneys, right? It's very, very complex. So when we have, so that's what we mean when we're talking about the kidney system in Chinese herbalism. Now, what we're talking about when we're talking about yang is another concept, a really important concept in Chinese herbalism, one of the most important concepts, because here we're starting to make that dichotomous choice, right? A dichotomous choice is a cleaving, a bifurcation of choices. You're choosing one path or another path, right? This is how we do a lot of plant identification, a lot of diagnostics is through these concepts. So with yang, we think of the yang and yin concepts as taught in traditional Chinese medicine. We think of a mountain and the sun shining on the mountain, and then a river on the other side of the mountain. And so these kind of characterize the concepts of yang and yin. Yang is up here and yin is down here. So when we think of yang energetics, we think of an area exposed to the sun. So it's light and it's hot, it's dry, it's fiery, it's upward energy. It is life force and it's movement, right? Whereas we look at yin energy, it is the opposite side of the mountain. So yang is the sunny side of the mountain. The yin is the opposite side of the mountain. It's the protected side. So it's going to be shaded. It's going to be moist. There's water running through it. It is more stagnant. There isn't as much flow. It's more cool. It's more quiet, right? And so it's the opposite. This balance of yin and yang are one of these energetic patterns that we're going to apply to most pathways, because it just shows a sort of an excess or deficiency. It's hot and cold, right? It's these energetic patterns that are how we organize and make use of information. So when we talk then about a kidney yang tonic, we're talking about a tonic, something that is strengthening and nourishing, building to a system. What system? The kidney system. The kidney system of Jing, of nourished life force and generational essence, of sinews and ligaments and strengthening tissues. It is and so a yang tonic, it is increasing vitality, increasing, stimulating action there, right? We're not calming and cooling that system. We're stimulating and activating and energizing that system. So we can see that, yeah, isn't that a helpful image for the yin yang? It's a really, I love that way of conceptualizing. It's like all of a sudden you can see, oh yes, absolutely. It just falls into that balance. Yes, so Jing and Qi and Shen, these are the three treasures. Thank you for bringing that up, Tuko. That was a great question. And I meant to. So in Chinese herbalism, these are the three treasures, the three precious compounds that our bodies hold. So this Jing, this is our vital essence, our generational essence. Qi is the energy, the life force that flows through us. And Shen is the heart energy. The heart, compassion, love, connection, comfort, the spirit, right? So the Shen is our heart spirit, Qi is our life force, and Jing is the generational vitality. Yes. Ooh, the three treasures. Yeah, nice. Cool. So yes, thank you for asking that. So kidney yang tonic. Now, when we're talking about Epimedium as a kidney yang tonic, we can conceptualize that really well. Oh, it's going to be warming and stimulating to this generational life force, this compound that helps to increase fertility, increase sexual function, stimulating sexual function in a specific way, in a heating and drying and stimulating way. What we do also want to recognize is that's not the only way to enhance sexual function, right? Because sometimes sexual function requires more yin, right? Sometimes we need more moisture, we need more calming, we need more soothing, we need more fluid, right? We need more movement. We don't need heat and dryness and irritation, right? So, oftentimes, especially in our dominant culture, we have a tendency to conceptualize sexuality, for example, and energy, for example, as these inherently yang, stimulating, dry, energetically yang concepts. And they often are, but they aren't always, right? And so it's more helpful to look at our bodies, our own bodies, and see how these feel, how these concepts feel when applied to us. Is this what the kind of support that my body needs? And you're able to, if we take a moment to understand what like kidney yang means, then you're able to look at your own body and make that assessment. Do you need this type of support? This is one of the reasons why I didn't ever go into Chinese herbalism, is because all of this language to me is not accessible, right? If something has to go through this much explanation for you to understand it, and it's a pretty basic concept, if we just translate it to Western language, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I totally get that. It's an aging sexuality tonic, endocrine tonic. It's got some other really cool stuff that I'm going to go into in just a moment, but generally that. It's beautiful and important language in Chinese herbalism, and it's beneficial and it's accessible if that is the culture that you're raised in. But when we're raised in a different culture, it can be a little bit hard. It can be very hard for us to understand language of a different healing tradition. And so that means when you go to a Chinese herbalist and they say, oh, you need a kidney yang tonic, quite often people will come to me with that information, or they'll read about it, they'll read about what they need, right? And they'll see, oh, I need a kidney tonic. And they'll come in and say, well, I need dandelion leaf, right? I need a kidney tonic. It's like a Western kidney tonic. as dandelion leaf is not a Chinese kidney tonic because it's a functional system and not a system. So I like to have language and modalities that give you information that's going to make you stronger, more knowledgeable, more have more agency over your own body and understanding about how your own body works. And when we change the language, it doesn't give us that agency, right? Because you have to learn a whole new language about it. But we can also do it in little bits like we're doing today. We talked a little bit about Dhammayana as a way to increase passion. Would you consider this similar in that way? So yeah, Dhammayana has a very similar energetic pattern if we look at it in terms of Western energetics, right? That warming, stimulating, spicy, moving energy. Very much we can feel that quality. There is an endocrine nourishing chemistry about Epimedium that isn't present in Dhammayana, right? One of the compounds there's two compounds of really great interest in Epimedium, right? One of them is steroidal saponins. Doesn't have a huge amount of them, but it has some. Whenever we see steroidal saponins, these are compounds that are raw material that are used for your body to make steroidal hormones. The steroidal hormones are the adrenal hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, noradrenaline, and then the sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, the androgens, and vitamin D. And so plants that have a high amount of steroidal saponins have an effect generally on the steroidal hormones because they have structural compounds that are kind of raw material that the body can use to alter those. So this we commonly see. However, there is another compound of great interest in Epimedium that I want to introduce you to. And that is Icariin. Icariin is a flavonoid, right? It's a different flavonoid. It's a flavonoid glycoside, so it acts differently than a lot of flavonoids. I need to clarify that because I have you all trained to understand what certain flavonoids do. But this is a glycoside, so it's a little bit different. So Icariin is a really, really cool compound because it works to inhibit an enzyme called PDE5. So it inhibits, it reduces this enzyme. So this is, I will write this out for you. So phosphodiesterase type 5 is the enzyme. How do you know it's an enzyme? Because it ends in ASE. ASE means an enzyme. Enzymes cleave things, they break things down, they stop things from happening, right? So this is a very important, very problematic enzyme. So PDE5. To understand PDE5, actually, I'm going to have to erase all of this and go through a little bit of physiology. Having to do with blood flow to the genitals and blood flow to smooth muscle tissue. So we have different types of muscle. We have skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is under voluntary control. It's what moves our body around, right? And then we have smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is under autonomic control. It's in our internal organs. It isn't striated muscle. It's under control of the autonomic nervous system. Not under our control. So there's certain types of smooth muscle is very rich in blood vessels, and that includes the genitals. The genitals have a lot of blood vessels there, and sexual arousal has a lot to do with dilating those blood vessels and getting blood flow to the genitals, right? And so the primary thing that causes that is a compound called nitric oxide. So there's a lot of interest in nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a compound produced on sexual arousal. There's a lot of other ways also that you can increase nitric oxide. Heart is cardiac muscle. Ooh, that is such a good question, Tuco. You get like 15 points for your good questions today. Heart is the third type of muscle tissue. So we have skeletal muscle, we have smooth muscle, and we have cardiac muscle. Such a good question. Yeah, completely different. So nitric oxide, when we are sexually aroused, our body increases production of nitric oxide that relaxes blood vessels, and it increases production of a compound called cyclic GMP. Cyclic GMP is causes relaxation of blood vessels, increased blood flow to the genitalia, increased sensitivity of the nerve endings. So yay you. So this process of increased nitric oxide, increased cyclic GMP, increased blood flow, increased arousal is one of the ways that we are sexually stimulated. Now, there's if the body was constantly producing cyclic GMP, we would be constantly have dilation of blood vessels. And so, as with most things in the body, we have a way of triggering something and a way of stopping something, right? So we activate something and then we inhibit it. The thing that inhibits cyclic GMP is phosphodiesterase type 5, or PDE5. So PDE5 neutralizes cyclic GMP, which means that if your body is trying to dilate blood vessels and get blood flow into the genitalia to increase arousal, and you have an elevated PDE5 level, which oftentimes people do, then it is going to be really difficult for you to get aroused because you can't get the blood flow in there. So Icarian, one of the primary constituents in Epimedium, inhibits PDE5, and this is exactly the way the mechanism by which Viagra works, and Cialis, the primary erectile dysfunction medications, work on this same pathway. What it doesn't do is it's not increasing directly androgens. It's not increasing directly testosterone. It's not increasing directly, it's a mild phytoestrogen, but it's not really increasing those. It has a little bit of those steroidal saponins, but that's not its primary action. Its primary action is much more, on one hand, balanced in terms of regulating endocrine function, and nourishing endocrine function, and nourishing, as we said, the kind of kidney yang, and specifically here in increasing blood flow. But it's a much more nuanced and complex way that it works in the body. So the other thing that it does when we increase PDE5, when we're able to enhance cyclic GMP in the body, we're also able to increase mental clarity and focus. So this is also a plant that is used for memory and clarity. It is said that, so it increases the strength of the sinews and bones and marrow. This is another important kind of aspect of that kidney yang tonic, the building of that kidney essence. Kidney also involves strengthening and nourishing support of structural compounds. And this is associated with the qualities of aging that we see associated with it, right? As we age, as endocrine hormones are decreased, estrogen decreases, testosterone decreases, DHEA decreases, all of the things tend to decrease, and tissue elasticity, tissue health tends to decrease also as a function of aging. Horny goatweed and many other herbs, this is similar to how things like Heshawu works in this same way. They are decreasing the patterns of aging, the patterns that come along with aging. So we see when we're looking at a kidney yin tonic like this, the indications for it are things like fatigue and low libido, generalized weakness, breakdown of tissues, weak hair and nails, weak sinews, weak bones, bone deterioration, and increase in osteoclasts, which are the cells that break down bone tissue, so osteoporosis and bone weakness. Infertility, premature aging, all of these are the indications, the reasons why you would choose to use a plant like this, an herb like this. Yeah. Oh, and so I was talking about one of the important qualities of these plants when we talk about, anti-aging tonics, tonics that reverse some of the tissue changes that come along with aging. The primary issue is that the body is less able to build healthy tissue. And so, we talk about that a lot. That is a really, really big factor in aging. And so the ability to support sinew and bone and marrow health, this is in TCM language saying that this is a plant that increases the strength and elasticity of tissues. The marrow part of it, the cool thing about the marrow part of it is in Chinese herbalism, marrow also includes the central nervous system, the spinal column, and the brain. And we do see this as a plant that is helpful for brain function as well. So in that respect, that building of marrow, that's how it's termed. I think this is so cool because we have, thousands of years of tradition of use of this plant. We have an enormous body of work, of information on the use of this plant. We have a lot of evidence of its abilities to do this. What we don't have is the chemistry, right? We have the language around it in Chinese herbalism, but in Chinese herbalism, the tradition and the study is different than Western herbalism. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And so it's hard sometimes for us to wrap our brains around it. It certainly is hard for me because in my Western brain, I want answers in the package that I generally get my answers. And we don't get those because this isn't a plant from our tradition. It's a plant from another tradition. We're starting to gain more of that as we do research into it, but it's somewhat new. So strengthening bones and sinews. It's also helpful for dispelling wind and damp. So that's another energetic pattern. And if we think of this, that this is a yang, this is a warming, drying plant, we can see energetically that makes sense, that it would balance cold, damp conditions. And when we think of cold and damp here, we're thinking generally of things like arthritis, of cold, damp arthritis that does not come from overuse of tissues, but arthritis that comes from lack of use. And generally we see a lot of swelling, we see accumulation of fluids, swelling of joints, right? Kind of stagnation and dampness there, not so much the dry, cracked, irritated, inflamed tissues. Yes, so this is Epimedium, horny goatweed. It is a much more beneficial, wide-ranging therapeutic herb than the name horny goatweed would lead you to believe. And so for the next couple of weeks, we'll look at formulating with these concepts of what does it mean to formulate for a kidney yang tonic. How would we balance that out using Western herbs? How do we also support the health of the kidney system, right? What can we do to kind of go into that? And there we're primarily talking about, in Western terms, we're talking more about the endocrine tonics there. So we'll do some formulation blending in the next couple of weeks with that. So in general, all TCM herbs are either yin or yang, and you have to balance them based on our condition or patterns. Yeah, sometimes they're going to be more balanced, right? It's not a binary. It's a spectrum, but it's an energetic pattern that encompasses much of what we talk about in class, right? There's just different ways to talk about energetics. We have the TCM 5 elements, we have the Ayurvedic dosha theory, we have Western energetics and tissue states. It all is exactly the same stuff. Any info on how it likes to grow? That is a great question, and I don't know. The person who I would check with on that would be Stephen Foster. Stephen Foster died a little while ago, but Stephen Foster, one of the most brilliant photographers in herbalism, his herb photographs are everywhere. They're just beautiful, stunning. But he also did, his wife was a TCM practitioner, and he published a book on growing medicinal TCM herbs. So he has a great book on that. And then there's also a book by, I think his name is Tim Scott, on growing Chinese herbs. You could also maybe go, ooh, this would be fun if you don't know this, do this. On YouTube, check to see if Mountain Gardens has any videos on Epimedium, because Mountain Gardens is an amazing space. It's up by, in North Carolina, up by Asheville. And it was the home of an herbalist, Mountain Gardens, named Joe Hollis. Joe died last year or the year before, after a fire came through and destroyed the school and the library and the gardens of Mountain Gardens. And herbalists in that area came through and helped to rebuild over the pandemic. The last couple of years, they've been doing Janet Kent and Dave Meesters, two amazing herbalists in the Asheville area, just amazing people, have been responsible in the protection and rebuilding of Mountain Gardens, the rebuilding of the amazing library there, and the protecting of Mountain Gardens now that Joe has died. I don't know what they're doing there, but Joe had made a number of really amazing videos on YouTube where he's just wandering through his garden, and he grew a lot of TCM herbs. So if he did, that's the video that you want to see, because he's charming. Old guy, white hair, creaky old voice, cute little hat, wandering around in his garden talking about herbs. He's just delightful. So check there, because he might have that. Joe Hollis, Hollis is his name, and Mountain Gardens is probably the YouTube channel. Yeah, I don't think it's under Joe's name. All right, so over the next couple of weeks, we'll do formulation here. See if y'all can find some horny goatweed and start taking some. If you don't have horny goatweed around you, do you have other plants that are considered to be kidney yang tonics? And do you need, is that appropriate for your body? Not everyone needs that type of stimulation and support. So one of the first things before automatically going, yeah, I'm going to try this, is, hey, is that something that my body needs? If so, if not, right, so we can do a check-in and kind of feel how that feels if we push that yang concept, if we push the yin concept. How does that apply to my body? How does that feel to my body? How does that feel to if I imagine my jing, if I imagine that essence, right? How does it feel if I heat and warm and dry that versus cool and moisten and move that, right? It's good information for you to check in with, and it's okay if you're not really clear on that. Just keep on asking yourself and be curious to it and open to the answers, and it'll become more familiar, more comfortable for you as you do it. All right. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for showing up. It's always so fun to talk to you all on a Monday. And I'll see you soon.